We welcome now Scott LaFoy, the Vice President for Nuclear and Technology Security Systems at Exiger. Scott, thank you very much for joining us tonight. So a major concern is that Iran already has uranium enriched to about 60%, which is very close to weapons grade. Would you mind defining the breakout risk for us? What could follow as a result?
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you so much for having me on tonight. So, when you enrich uranium up to 60%, so 90% is what you usually consider weapons grade. 60% is not going to go into a missile, for example. And so, when they say they have 60% enriched uranium, that means it needs a little more work to be polished up to 90% and then actually turned into formal weapons fuel and built into a weapon. So it's not a fast process. It's probably several weeks of processing to get back up to 90%, depending on what the state of Isfahan and Natanz and Fordow, the major nuclear facilities and centrifuge sites in Iran are. So that takes time. Those sites were bombed last year and were not brought back to operational capacity. So it's likely several weeks to several months to actually finish any sort of weapons grade fuel, then however much time it would take them to assemble a bomb. It's not known in the open source how close they ever got to creating the sort of non-nuclear components to a nuclear weapon. So it's still likely, even if all of their nuclear sites were working and in top condition, several weeks to several months to the actual preparation for a single nuclear weapon.
Understood. And the vice president in recent hours has said Iran has agreed to destroy their stockpile of enriched material. What does that process look like? How would we ensure that that material has, in fact, been destroyed?
That's a great question because it's difficult and it usually requires an inspector or someone on site to monitor it. In previous agreements with other countries, when there has been a removal or a downblending of a nuclear program, you'll have the IAEA to come in and provide third-party neutral confirmation and tracking for that fissile material, so that a third party, so not necessarily the United States, not an interested party, comes in to say, yes, we can confirm that this is gone. The IAEA and Iran have a difficult relationship. Safeguards with the IAEA were taken off years ago, and so there's a bit of an accountability problem in terms of understanding exactly how much uranium is left. But that would be the typical way to do it. The United States has also, it seems, suggested that material be brought back to the United States, where it would likely either be sent to either Oak Ridge or Savannah River site, where U.S. experts with the Department of Energy and with NNSA would downblend that from 60% to a non-weapons grade, or use it for something else and incorporate it into different fuels. Both of these have been done in the past. With the recent Venezuelan materials that were brought to the United States, they were taken to Savannah River site for that, but that was a very small amount of material. Something this large has not been moved out in quite a long time, since I think the 90s. But
Right.
then Iran has also said on their side they could downblend it in country, which would be taking the current 60% enraged uranium hexafluoride, which is a gas, and basically taking that down, diluting it, as it were, and bringing it back down to something under 20%, preferably under 5%.
Right. And there are other practical applications for that material, too. I wanted to get there, but we've got about 60 seconds left. And I want to ask you, digging up and removing these stockpiles, it's a complicated process. What does this look like? And how will the U.S. be certain we have made it to every stockpile?
It is almost impossible to be certain right now. Obviously, the United States intelligence community is exquisite and extremely talented, but even in open media right now, there was indications of trucks moving around prior to the 2025 bombing of the nuclear sites, making it very hard to reach accountability for the uranium currently in Iran. So it's believed to be mostly kept in one place in Isfahan, but it's not 100% sure. Practically, there's also reporting out of CNN that there are additional fortifications and defenses that have been built around the bombed sites, meaning that unless there is a negotiation worked out, it would be an extremely complicated active military operation to retrieve that. Even if there was not defenses, it's going to require prime movers, literal bulldozers, excavators to dig it out, to clean up anything that happened during the bombing when those facilities were struck last year. And then the actual removal of the material, which typically is kept in kind of, people call them scuba tanks sometimes. That's a fairly reasonable thing to call them, or other gaseous cylinders, which have to then be repackaged, sometimes in thousands and thousands of pounds of protective material, and then flown out. And that's if it's being moved to the United States. We did this in 1994 in Kazakhstan. It took it took around 30 days of 6-day work weeks, 12 hours a day, round the clock work, and that was without a military operation around it, or any concern about a war striking out. That was with a consent from the local government, from the Kazakh government, to remove that material.
Yeah, well, these are certainly critical insights as we monitor these talks and wait and see what happens next. Scott LaFoy, always appreciate you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much.